Chapter 32. The third time Sean woke up, he could speak and think. The first time, bright lights, whiteness blinding him. A human shape, a nurse telling him to rest, gently pushing him back as he struggled to get up. He was trying to explain that he didn't need a fucking rest. He needed to fucking get out there and fucking stop the fucking fuck-rich Malcolm bike bomb coffee. Ow, don't stick a needle in my arm, you cow. The second time, the white lights began to fade, going down to grey, other colours edging in, forming shapes. A room with white walls, furniture that had seen better days, a television high up, a nurse at the end of his bed reading his notes. Had to be the infirmary at Burnley. Funny, he didn't remember having an accident. Then he frowned. Burnley? Hadn't there been other stuff in his life since then? Something had happened, but he couldn't remember, so it probably wasn't important. The nurse looked fit. He would ask her the next time he woke up. The third time, he recognised the person dozing in the chair next to his bed. "Mum?" he croaked. His throat was dry as dust. She was awake in a moment. "Sweetheart, darling, here!" She held his head up so he could take a long sip of water out of a straw in a bottle. Then she pinched his cheek. "And happy birthday! 18 today, my little boy!" Her face fell. "Oh, love, I was so worried." 18? Where was he? How long had he been out for? What happened? "There was an explosion in Trafalgar Square," she said. "What were you doing in Trafalgar Square? If you were in town, you could have come and seen me." "Explosion?" "Oh, yes. Doctor says you got hit by a flying metal chair. Concussion and bruises, nothing too serious, they say. Nothing too serious, my arse. If it knocks my little boy out, then that's what I call serious. I'll go and let the nurse know you're awake. Oh, and here's your friend. I'll let you two have a chat." She leaned forward and whispered into his ear. "Bit of all right, isn't he?" Sean frowned, still trying to remember. Trafalgar Square. Something really important. And then, like it had just been uploaded into his memory, it all came back. Not just Trafalgar Square, but what he'd been doing there. "Mum," Sean said suddenly. He clutched feebly at her arm and fought back the panic. "Don't go!" He couldn't see round her to make out who this friend was. He was rich, had to be. Come to pay him back. He would only need a few seconds and Sean would be completely helpless. But his mum had moved away out of the room and he recognised the visitor. "Sergeant," he said in surprise. They gazed at each other. Adams had a large envelope and a newspaper under his arm. "Well, you remember me at least," he said finally. "Do you remember this?" He unfolded the newspaper. It was the Evening Standard, and the front page read, "Massive explosion in Trafalgar Square." "I kind of missed the moment it went bang," Sean said weakly. And he was 18 today, which meant he had been out for 3 days. Why aren't I dead? Adams flicked the paper open and scanned through it. Blah, 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 unnamed member of the Special Forces, and do not let that go to your head, laddie, because I promise you it no longer applies, who was believed to have been in the blast shadow of Nelson's column, was taken to... He folded the paper with a flat smile. So, shockwave couldn't get you, but never underestimate the range of a flying metal chair. Funny, Sean frowned. Even that made his head hurt. But he knew there were gaps in his understanding, and he wanted them plugged. What happened to the other bombs? We got all 3 vans, all defused. 2 of the drivers surrendered without a fight, including Corporal Heaton. 1, a red-headed man, Adams paused, resisted with an army-issue Glock. The snipers had to take him out. Sean closed his eyes. R.I.P. Copper. And what about Rich? Adams paused, looking hesitant for the first time since Sean had known him. He closed his eyes and groaned. Oh, fuck, he got away. Remember, my involvement with MI5 stopped the moment you were no longer useful to them, which means that so did my access to information. But as I understand it, he got away, Sean said again. Yes. On the other hand, the spook's got a lot of useful information on him. He won't be picking up the old cosy life in Guildford again. Any more good news? Actually, yes. Adams brandished the envelope. I came to wish you a happy birthday. Oh, you shouldn't have. Well, that's all right. I almost didn't. Adams passed the envelope over. Inside was a card, a colourful badge. 18. Legal for anything. There was a hole on the front with the caption, Guess who this card's for? Put your finger here to find out. He followed the instructions and opened the card. It was signed by all the lads, and his finger stuck out from the groin of a cartoon man. The caption read, It's to a real dick. He waggled his finger up and down and tried to smile. Jeez, guess I'm all grown up now. He leaned over to put the card in his locker. Officially adult, Adams agreed. Which means we can officially court-martial you. Sean looked at him. Then he looked around and took in the complete absence of handcuffs, red caps, or any other kind of security. But you won't? He whispered. Suddenly he had to turn his head away as tears filled his eyes. Shit. He'd always known this would come, but shit. You're just going to throw me out quietly, aren't you? Why shouldn't they, he thought bitterly. If he remembered Trafalgar Square, he also remembered how he had got involved in all this in the first place. Basically blackmailed into it by MI5 with the threat of a long jail sentence which he totally deserved if he didn't comply. And he had failed to stop 2 bombs. But even before that, everything the army had done for him he had just thrown back in its face. Even after he monumentally screwed up, even after he was busted by MI5, he remembered Franklin and Adams standing by him in that interview room, not leaving him, backing him up. He had briefly been part of a family that would support him unconditionally for the rest of his life. And he chucked it away, because for some insane reason he had preferred the old lifestyle. Contrast that with the guys whose continued friendship could only be bought with stolen money. Now why would we do that? What's the poor civvy world ever done to deserve having you unleashed on it? Sean stared at him, eyes wide. Your actions, said the sergeant, saved lives. Even though 2 bombs exploded, no deaths have been reported. The way you discharged your weapons safely showed an exemplary regard for public safety and no thought for your own. You know there are armed cops everywhere in the West End. You could have been shot yourself at any moment. In short, there's too much good soldier in you to waste. And it helps that Mr. Franklin has been putting his own career on the line, saying that if you go, he goes, and he is far too good an officer to chuck away. Here. He leaned down and pinned the 18 badge onto Sean's hospital gown. And that's the only medal you're getting, because there isn't one for being a lucky bastard who doesn't have the sense to call up the authorities before going all vigilante on his own. Didn't think they'd listen, Sean said weakly. Hi, I'm the gun-toting nutter who just blew up a van on the South Circular. I think you'd have got their attention. I know you don't have the best impression of authority, but try to remember they're not all stupid. Sean looked down at the badge. Turning 18 was no big deal. It wasn't exactly going to change his life. But having Adams pin something on him with his own hands, that counted for a lot. The sergeant smiled. It was an unusual sight. You've been lucky, Harker. You were offered an olive branch, you took it. If you hadn't, then right now you'd be with your friends and looking at the best part of your life behind bars. I killed a guy, Sean said quietly. Adam's face turned to stone. I witnessed it via the drone. So did a lot of other people higher up than me. We all saw a soldier on active deployment using reasonable force to defend himself. I would say the circumstances ticked every box in the rules of engagement. Sean nodded. Words weren't needed. Not now. He was too tired anyway. He just wanted to go back to sleep, if he was honest, and his head was hurting. But he had one more question. Why did the spooks lump you with me, Sergeant? Thought it would have been the lieutenant's job. It was. I volunteered. You? Why? I inflicted you on the army. I believe in clearing up my own messes. Adams grinned. And of course, I also like to take credit for my success stories. Suddenly Sean couldn't meet his eyes. He turned his head away and blinked rapidly again. Really let you down, didn't I? He murmured. By being a thieving dipstick? I already knew that. One thing I didn't have you pegged as was a murderer and a traitor. And guess what? You're not. Well, enough of these pleasantries. I'd best be going. Let you get some rest. Adams drew himself up into NCO mode. Private Harker, he barked. Sean lay at attention in bed. Sergeant, he shouted at the ceiling. Get better. Yes, Sergeant. At ease, with a half smile on his face, the same one he'd had when they first met, Adams turned away. Sean lay back on his pillow with a much larger smile of his own. So, he was still a Fusilier. For the first time since he'd joined up, that was more important than being one of the Lytton guys. Sean had been one of the guys since the day he was born. The streets had shaped the way he grew. Look how easily he'd slipped back into acting like one of them as soon as Heaton came along with his money and flash car. That little lapse had almost got him killed. It was one more item to add to the charge sheet against the gang that was growing inside his head. Basically, he'd let them quietly screw him for his entire life. But the army had shown him another way of getting through life, and it was infinitely better. So even if the guys were still an ongoing concern, if they didn't just collapse when the news about Matt and Copper came out, or get muscled out by some other outfit, I'm not one of the guys anymore, Sean murmured. And it was as if a weight he hadn't even noticed had fallen away from him. It lasted about a second, until he thought about his mum. There was no way they were going to look after her now, and he didn't want them to. That would mean owing them something. So it was down to him. He would just have to get her out of there, set her up in a flat of her own, but do it honestly and on his pay. It would be tight. He needed to think it through. His eyes were growing heavy, his thoughts muzzy. His battered body was demanding sleep, and there wasn't much point fighting it. Not if he was going to obey the sergeant's order. Whatever. Bring it all on. He could take it.